The massive lecture hall floated in orbit above the blue planet Earth. Stars shined through the transparent ceiling. Below, storms moved slowly across the planet's surface like white scars. Inside the hall, hundreds of alien students sat in rising circles. Some had scales, some had fur, some had glowing skin. All of them were watching the center stage. Professor Kareth stood tall and still. He was one of the most respected xenobiologists from the Galactic Academy of Sciences. He had studied dangerous life forms for over 40 cycles. He had survived toxic jungles and acid oceans. But today, his voice carried something different: concern. Behind him, a giant hologram flickered to life. A small red plant rotated slowly in the air. It looked harmless, small, bright, almost beautiful. "It kills in seconds," the professor said calmly. The words spread across the hall like cold wind. Students shifted in their seats. The hologram zoomed closer. The plant had smooth red skin with light wrinkles. A sharp green stem curved at the top. Its surface reflected the light softly. It did not look like death. "One bite," the professor continued, "causes extreme internal burning. The nervous system overloads. The victim feels as if their body is on fire from the inside." A low murmur filled the hall. In 87% of tested species, full system collapse occurs within minutes. Charts appeared beside the plant: chemical structure, heat levels, toxic response data. Capsaicin concentration, extreme. Pain index, off the measurable scale. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. This organism evolved naturally on a level 9 Deathworld. The word echoed across the chamber. Deathworld. Every student knew what that meant. A world too violent for most intelligent life. A world filled with predators, toxins, storms, and constant danger. A world where survival itself was a daily battle. A world called Earth. Slowly, the hologram shifted to show the blue planet below them. Oceans, forests, deserts, ice, and life everywhere. Whispers began spreading from row to row. Humans come from there. They survived that? They evolved there? Professor Kareth raised a hand, and silence returned. "This plant is classified as a biological hazard," he said firmly. "Transport is restricted. Exposure requires protective gear. Direct consumption is forbidden." He paused. Then he added quietly, "Yet one species consumes it willingly." The hall went completely still. In the back row sat a human, a transfer student. He looked smaller than many others. No claws, no armor, no fangs. Just two eyes watching calmly. Professor Kareth slowly turned toward him. "You are from Earth," he said. "This plant grows in your natural ecosystem." More data appeared: recorded human consumption logs, agricultural production numbers, culinary usage frequency. The numbers were not small. They were massive. The professor's voice lowered. "Based on chemical analysis, your species should not survive consuming this organism." All eyes turned toward the human. Some students leaned away from him slightly, as if danger might spread. The hologram zoomed even closer to the plant. Bright red, small, deadly. The professor pointed directly at the human student. "You are from Earth." The human nodded once. "Your people call this plant—" Silence filled every corner of the hall. Even the station's background hum felt distant. The human leaned forward slightly. He looked at the rotating hologram, then back at the professor. His expression did not show fear. It showed confusion. "We call that chili pepper," he said simply. The words did not match the tension. For a moment, no one reacted. Then gasps broke out across the hall. "Impossible! That is a weapon. Why would they name it?" The professor blinked slowly. "You avoid it?" he asked carefully. The human's lips curved into a small smile. "No," he replied. "We grow it." The hall exploded in whispers. Some students stood up in shock. Others began scanning the human with personal devices. The professor stared at him in disbelief. "You cultivate a lethal toxin," Kareth said slowly, "on purpose." The human tilted his head. "It's not a toxin." The professor's voice tightened. "It causes extreme pain." The human nodded casually. "Yes." Silence again. Then he added the words that froze the entire academy. "It makes food taste better." No one laughed. No one moved. Above them, Earth continued to spin quietly in space. And for the first time, the galaxy began to understand something terrifying. On a Deathworld, even the poison was seasoning, and the species that called it spice had learned to enjoy the burn.
The professor did not believe him. There had to be a mistake. Maybe the human was lying. Maybe humans had special protective gear. Maybe this was some kind of trick. Professor Kareth turned toward the control panel beside him. "If this is true," he said slowly, "we will observe it scientifically." The hall became very quiet. "Prepare a live specimen," he ordered. From the ceiling, 2 security drones descended. They were silver, round, and heavily shielded. Between them floated a sealed, transparent container. Inside was the red plant, fresh, shiny, dangerous. Warning symbols flashed around the container. Chemical hazard, irritant gas, high pain index. Even the air sensors in the room adjusted automatically. Small vents activated to protect the alien students from airborne particles. The container opened with a soft hiss. A faint, sharp smell spread through the air. Several students covered their breathing filters. Professor Kareth looked directly at the human. "You understand the risk?" he asked carefully. The human nodded once. "Yes." "You may experience extreme pain." The human gave a small shrug. "It tastes better cooked," he said. A few students made nervous sounds. One dropped a datapad. Another shifted farther away from the human. The professor's eyes narrowed. "Proceed." The drone lowered the chili pepper into a small, sterile tray in front of the human. It looked harmless, small enough to fit in one hand, bright red under the lights. The human picked it up. No gloves, no protection. Gasps echoed around the hall. The professor began recording everything. The human turned the pepper in his fingers, studying it. "This one is small, not very strong." The professor did not respond. He raised his scanner and aimed it at the human. "All systems recording," he announced. The human lifted the pepper toward his mouth. Many students looked away. One whispered, "He will die." Another said, "Why would they eat poison?" The human opened his mouth and took a large bite. Crunch. The sound echoed clearly in the silent hall. Bright juice sprayed slightly from the broken skin of the pepper. The sharp smell grew stronger. Several alien students reacted immediately. 2 fainted. One made a choking sound from the scent alone. The professor focused only on the scanner readings. Heart rate, rising slightly. Blood pressure, stable. Neural activity, increased. Pain signals, high, very high. The human chewed slowly, calmly. His face became red. Small drops of sweat formed on his forehead. But he did not scream. He did not fall. He swallowed. The professor stared at the readings in disbelief. "This level of neural pain response should cause shock," Kareth whispered. The human breathed out slowly. "Yeah, it has some heat," he said. He took another bite. Crunch. More gasps filled the room. The professor's hands trembled slightly as he checked the scanner again. Still alive, still stable. Pain levels were extreme, but his body was adjusting. adapting. How? One student whispered. The human finished the pepper and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. He looked at the professor. "It's mild," he said. The word mild echoed louder than any scream. The professor lowered his scanner slowly. "This is impossible," he said quietly. "No species voluntarily consumes a pain-inducing toxin at this level." The human tilted his head slightly. "It's not about the pain," he said. "Then what is it about?" the professor demanded. The human smiled again. "It's about flavor." The hall fell silent once more. Flavor, a word that meant pleasure, enjoyment, choice. Professor Kareth stepped closer. "Your species consumes this regularly." The human nodded. "Yes. We grow many kinds." "How many?" "Thousands." A wave of shock moved across the audience. "Some are much hotter than this one," the human added casually. The professor's breathing slowed. "Hotter," he repeated. The human leaned back in his chair. "You should try the spicy ones." Several students made alarmed sounds. The professor stared at the empty tray. The plant was gone, consumed. The human was still sitting there, alive, sweating, but smiling. For the first time, fear in the room was not directed at the plant. It was directed at the human. Because if a species could eat something that caused this much pain and call it mild, then what else could they survive, and what else could they enjoy?
The lecture hall did not calm down after the test. Even after the human finished the pepper, whispers continued. Professor Kareth stood still for a long moment. Then he turned sharply toward the central system. "Access full human agricultural records," he ordered. The main hologram changed. The single red pepper disappeared. In its place, streams of data began to flood the air. Images, charts, historical records. The professor's eyes moved quickly as he read. The students watched in silence. What appeared on the screen made the room colder. Humans did not just survive the plant, they domesticated it. Ancient records showed early humans collecting wild peppers thousands of years ago. They studied them. They planted seeds near their homes. They selected the strongest plants. They improved them. The hologram showed early farms, then modern farms, endless green fields filled with red peppers, greenhouses, laboratories, packaging factories, trade ships exporting them across the planet. "This is incorrect," one student whispered. Professor Kareth zoomed in on genetic charts. "It is accurate," he said quietly. The genetic code of the plant had been altered, changed by human hands, modified to increase capsaicin levels, modified to increase heat, modified to increase pain. The class reacted with fear. "You made it stronger?" an alien student asked in a shaking voice. All eyes turned to the human again. He nodded calmly. "Yes." "But why?" another student demanded. The human folded his arms. "It makes food better." The answer felt too simple. The professor pulled up more images, different shapes, different colors, small round peppers, long thin ones, bright yellow, dark purple, even black. "There are over 4,000 documented varieties," the professor said slowly. The hall went silent. 4,000? Someone repeated. "Some produce capsaicin levels 10 times higher than the specimen consumed today." Gasps filled the air. The human looked at the images and smiled slightly. "Oh, those are nice," he said. "Good for competitions." "Competitions?" the professor asked. "Yes, humans sometimes compete to eat the hottest peppers." The room exploded with noise. "That is self-harm. That is madness. Why would they do that?" The human looked confused by the reaction. "It's fun," he said. "But it causes pain," a student shouted. The human nodded again. "Yes." "Then why continue?" He thought for a moment. Then he answered simply, "That's the fun part." Silence. Professor Pereth felt something shift inside his understanding. He began to see the pattern. Humans did not avoid pain. They studied it. They faced it. They trained their bodies to handle it. The screen showed medical reports. Repeated exposure increased tolerance. The nervous system adapted. Pain receptors adjusted. Recovery time shortened. "They built resistance," the professor whispered. "Yes," the human said. "You start small, then you build up." The professor's mind raced. On most worlds, species evolved to avoid harm. Pain was a warning. Pain meant stop. Pain meant danger. But humans treated pain differently. For them, pain was a challenge, a limit to push, a wall to break. The hologram shifted again. It showed human history, freezing climates, burning deserts, violent storms, deadly predators, toxic plants, danger everywhere. On a world like that, hiding was not enough. Survival required learning, experimenting, adapting. Professor Kareth spoke slowly, thinking out loud. "On Earth, the environment itself is hostile." The human nodded. "Yes." "So your species learned to test it?" "Yes." "To taste it?" "Yes." "To change it?" The human smiled. "Exactly." The professor looked at the class. "Humans did not simply survive their death world," he said quietly. "They experimented with it." The hologram zoomed in on a single pepper again. Small, red, simple. But now it looked different. It was not just a plant. It was proof. Proof that humans turned poison into flavor, turned pain into pleasure, turned danger into culture. Professor Kareth looked at the human once more. "Do you fear this plant?" he asked. The human shook his head. "No." "Why?" The answered without hesitation. "Because we understand it." The professor felt a strange chill. Understanding removed fear, and humans had spent thousands of years understanding everything that tried to harm them. On a world full of danger, humans did not hide from the fire. They learned to cook with it.
The Academy did not end the lecture that day. Instead, it declared an emergency session. Senior researchers joined through holographic links. Military observers logged in quietly. Cultural experts requested full data access. All of them wanted the same answer. If humans could eat biological weapons for pleasure, what else could they survive? Professor Kareth stood at the center again, but now the room felt different. The focus was no longer on the small red pepper. It was on the human. The main screen filled with new data. Expanding research to full human cultural archive, the professor announced. Images appeared. Humans drinking liquids that had warning labels in multiple alien languages. Fermented toxins, one scientist said carefully. The human nodded. "We call it alcohol." The screen showed chemical breakdown, ethanol toxicity levels, liver stress, neural impairment. "Humans consume this willingly?" a council member asked. "Yes," the professor answered slowly, "in social gatherings." The next image appeared. Humans sitting in rooms filled with thick smoke. Another toxin. Then footage of humans eating food cooked over open flames, standing dangerously close to high heat. More data followed. Humans jumping from tall cliffs attached to thin cords. Racing machines at extreme speeds. climbing frozen mountains, swimming in icy oceans. The hall grew silent again. "They choose these risks?" one observer whispered. "Yes," Professor Kareth replied. The screen shifted to historical records. Humans building rockets, strapping themselves inside controlled explosions, launching into space. Then a clear image appeared. A gray, dusty surface under a black sky. A human walking slowly. Footprints pressed into the dust of their natural satellite. "They walked on their own moon," a student said softly. The professor nodded. "Yes." The human in the back row looked almost shy now. "It was a big achievement for us," he said quietly. The data kept flowing. Extreme temperature endurance, from frozen polar regions to burning deserts. High gravity tolerance training. Pain endurance competitions. Medical records showing surgeries performed before advanced anesthetics existed. The conclusion forming in every alien mind was the same. The pepper was not the real shock. It was only a symbol. The real shock was the species itself. The humans were not strong because they were the largest. They were not armored. They did not have claws or venom. They were fragile compared to many species in the room. But they adapted. Over and over again. When something hurt them, they did not always run. Sometimes they studied it. Sometimes they improved it. Sometimes they turned it into culture. Professor Kareth slowly faced the human once more. "Why would your species eat something that hurts you?" he asked again, but this time his voice was softer. It was not an accusation, it was curiosity. The human thought carefully. The room waited. Finally, he answered in simple words, "Because we can." The words echoed in the silent hall, "Because we can." There was no anger in his voice, no pride, no threat, just a simple truth. For many alien species, survival meant avoiding danger at all cost. For humans, survival meant facing danger again and again, and every time they survived, their confidence grew. Pain became something temporary. Fear became something to understand. Limits became something to test. Professor Kareth felt something heavy in his chest. This was not recklessness. It was resilience. It was curiosity mixed with courage. Humans did not seek pain because they enjoyed suffering. They sought challenge because overcoming it proved they were still alive. The professor turned to the council. "The risk assessment must be updated," he said slowly. "Humans are not dangerous because they are violent. They are dangerous because they adapt faster than fear." Silence followed. The human shifted slightly in his seat, unaware that every advanced species in the galaxy was now rethinking its understanding of Earth. The pepper was no longer just a plant. It was evidence. Evidence of a species that could turn poison into spice, weakness into strength, pain into pride. And when asked why they would do such things, their answer was not complex, not scientific, not strategic, just simple. Because they can. And somehow, that was the most frightening truth of all.
Days later, the galactic database was updated. The change was small in size, but powerful in meaning. Earth remained classified as a Level 9 Deathworld. Storms still covered its oceans, predators still ruled its wild lands, toxins still grew in its soil. But beneath the danger rating, a new note appeared in bold letters. Human species demonstrates extreme adaptability to environmental hazards. The sentence spread across every major research network in the galaxy. Scholars read it, military leaders read it, explorers read it. The meaning was clear.
Earth was still dangerous, but now the galaxy understood something more important. So were the humans. Back at the Grand Galactic Academy, Professor Karreth stood before his class again. The lecture hall was full. More students than usual had arrived. Even visitors from other departments were present. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. The giant hologram activated once more. The small red chili pepper rotated slowly in the air. Bright, simple, deceptive. "This plant is lethal," Professor Karreth repeated calmly. No one laughed this time. No one whispered. They already knew the data. He paused, letting the words settle. "For most species." The difference in that sentence felt heavy. For most species, but not for humans. The professor looked toward the back row again. The human student sat there, relaxed as always, small, quiet, unarmed, yet somehow the most dangerous being in the room. Not because he wanted harm, but because he feared so little. Professor Karreth continued, "In our previous understanding, danger meant something to avoid." The hologram shifted to show Earth from orbit. Clouds moved across the blue surface. Lightning flashed inside storms. Volcanoes glowed faintly in the night. "But on Earth," the professor said slowly, "danger became a teacher." Images appeared. Early humans building fire, farming land, crossing oceans, studying medicine, testing food, improving crops. Even the chili pepper appeared again, wild and small at first, then larger and brighter over time. They did not remove danger from their world. They learned to live with it. He turned toward the human. "You faced poison and called it spice." The human smiled slightly. "Yes." "You faced extreme cold and built shelter." "Yes." "You faced gravity and walked in space." The human nodded again. "Yes." The professor felt something like respect growing inside him. A Deathworld does not create monsters, it creates pressure, and pressure creates strength. The room was silent as he spoke again. "Many species grow in safe environments. Stability shapes them." The hologram shifted to peaceful garden worlds, soft light, calm oceans, perfect climates. But humans grew in chaos. The image returned to Earth's storms. They adapted, not once, but constantly. The professor deactivated the hologram. The lights returned to normal. For a moment, there was only quiet breathing. Then the human slowly raised his hand. "Professor?" Karreth nodded. "Yes." The human leaned forward slightly, speaking with casual confidence. "Next week, I'm bringing hot sauce." Half the class reacted immediately. Several students made alarmed sounds. One dropped a tablet. Another checked emergency ventilation controls. "Hot sauce?" someone whispered in fear. The human nodded. "It's stronger than the pepper." A wave of panic spread through part of the hall, but something surprising happened. The other half of the class did not panic. They leaned forward, curious, interested, even excited. The professor noticed the difference. Fear had turned into fascination. He looked at the human for a long moment. A week ago, he would have forbidden it, declared it unsafe, classified it as reckless behavior. But now he understood something deeper. Stopping humans from testing limits would not protect the galaxy. Understanding them would. The professor gave a slow nod. "Ensure proper safety measures," he said calmly. The human grinned. "Of course." Laughter, soft but real, moved through the hall. The fear was no longer heavy. It had changed. Professor Karreth looked around at his students.
"Remember this lesson," he said. "A death world does not create monsters." He paused. "It creates survivors." His gaze returned to the human. And survivors do not simply endure. They learn, they adapt, they improve. The human leaned back in his chair, relaxed. Outside the transparent ceiling, Earth continued to spin in silent space. Storms moved, waves crashed, volcanoes burned. Life thrived. And somewhere on that world, fields of red peppers grew under the sun. Small plants, full of fire, just like the species that cultivated them. Because on Earth, danger was never the end of the story. It was only the beginning. And the galaxy was just starting to understand that humans were not unstoppable because they were fearless. They were unstoppable because they kept adapting, again and again and again.